Well, hello, and welcome into the Stressed Out webinar here at King of Kings Church in Omaha. We're so excited to have you here. This is going to be a great night. We've got some great people speaking, and we're just excited to help you be better at life tonight, and hopefully make your life a little bit easier. So this format is a little bit different than what we did last year, or I shouldn't say we, what they did last year for the anxiety seminar. This year, what we're doing is a Q&A format, and I'll be asking them questions, and we want to hear from you. So as you have questions about anxiety, stress, burnout, whatever you struggle with that's mental health related, or I guess if you have other struggles, you can shoot them in too, but whatever questions you have as we're talking, throw them in the chat bar below, and they'll get sent to my laptop right here, and we'll see your questions. And we're going to try our best to answer as many of your questions as we can get to. We're guessing we're going to get more than we can answer tonight, but we're excited to answer as many as we can. So tonight we do have one break built in, and it'll be right in the middle, and it's just a 5-minute musical break so that you can have a bit of a cognitive reset and take notes and do whatever you need to do. So anyways, let's dive in. So my name is Dillon Smith, and I'm a content manager for an author named Carey, who's a pastor in Canada, and I spoke here at King of Kings a few weeks on this topic, stress. And Nate and Brenda, I'm joined by you guys. Could you introduce yourselves, Brenda, and tell us a little bit about what you do and one practical way that you manage stress?
Absolutely. So glad everybody's here. We've been looking forward to this. And yes, in a different way this year, we don't have the live audience, but we're just so happy that you're here. Yeah, I'm Brenda Neyens. I'm the Spiritual Formation Director here at King of Kings. I'm a licensed counselor. And incredibly, I've been here for 15 years, which just went so fast. And yeah, so that's amazing. And Nate and I have been working together for quite a few years, and we're so excited that we have Dillon joining us this year. And so for my stress tip that I would like to share just right out of the gate is options. And why this is an important tip, this was important before COVID-19.
Yeah.
The more options you have, the less anxiety and stress you have, because this is how this works. If I feel like I'm trapped and I'm stuck, my anxiety and my stress goes up. And I feel like circumstances or people are controlling me. So you're going to hear us talk a lot about this idea of options. So I wanted to just say this right out of the gate, that the more you can think about various ways to do something, and let's be honest, during COVID-19, none of us get to do things our preferred way anyway.
Nope.
So one way you can lower your stress is just to lament the things that you have to let go of, but start looking at alternative ways that are not the best way, but are good enough during this season.
That's good. And Nate, you want to introduce yourself and give us a tip?
Yeah, so Nate Seadore. I am a licensed counselor.
Yes.
With CityCare Counseling. Also, I'm the co-clinical director of that group. And like Brenda said, we've been doing this a while, and it is exciting to have Dillon sort of direct us. It really helps us, I think, keep on track. So thank you, Dillon.
I wouldn't go that far. We haven't finished yet.
Sure. So what I've been interested in, and I think what I've really been working on for the last couple of years, and even more so now, is decision fatigue. And it is pretty much what it sounds like, which is the quality of your decisions over time diminish because of how many decisions you're making.
Yeah.
And some of the ways that I really looked into this, or what I focused on, was I started to evaluate, okay, what is my thought life like? When do I make decisions? And I started to lean towards, okay, where's my thinking spot? Where do I go that I seem to slip into introspection really well? And what I found is my top one was actually the shower. So when I'm taking a shower, I'm really thinking about my day, really trying to get sort of this foundation set.
Yeah.
And what I realized is I'm really wearing myself out. At that moment, I'm already starting to overthink. So I'm starting to think for like 10 or 15 minutes, just what does I have to do? How am I going to help this person? How am I going to do this, that? And essentially what I'm doing is using up energy that I could be spending throughout the day.
That's good.
Yeah, and so the fatigue shows up for me in procrastination, putting things off, right? Maybe irritability. And And so I started to focus on value. So the tip, I'm kind of molasses here, slowly dripping out the tip here.
You're good.
What I essentially did is start to think through like value or objective-based thinking.
Yeah.
So when I'm in that thinking spot, I'm starting to, lean towards what kind of counselor do I want to be today? Right?
Yeah.
What's going to be the most helpful, fatherly thing I can do for my kids?
Yeah.
As opposed to I got to do all these things for all these people.
Okay.
Just really summed it up.
That's good. So do you plan that out beforehand? Like, or I guess, have you grouped certain areas of your life where I only think about this here and this here? Or how do you go into that?
Yeah, I'm not that organized.
Okay.
But I wish
All right.
I was.
Yeah.
It kind of, there's a natural flow that happens, and I think we'll talk about it when
Yeah.
we kind of lean into
Yeah.
values, but there's sort of a natural flow that happens for me.
Okay.
And sometimes it is maybe what feels the most important, or where I'm feeling a little bit stressed.
Okay. All right. Well, that's really good. Well, a lot of the people that are joining us are probably coming here from hearing my sermon earlier on in July. And one of the things that I talked about there, well, I talked about a lot of things, but one of them is that I'm a digital marketer by trade. So I create content, write headlines, do all these things that are made to grab people's attention. And our company, we try to create a good place, or a place for the good people on the internet. Not all companies do that. And what I talked about is this danger of clickbait and anxiety that is happening around us because of how these digital marketing agencies are set up. We talk about headlines, we talk about different shareable images and how that affects our brains and our habits. Brenda, you have a pretty good story about this, actually. So could you tell us a little bit of backstory about your thought process on the 24-hour news cycle?
Absolutely. My thought on the 24/7 news cycle is I abandoned the 24/7 news cycle. Get out of here. I abandoned it back with at 9/11. And so for some watching, you know where you were for 9/11. Some of them, like Dillon, no.
I'm the first grade that really can't remember where I was.
Right. Yes. I've determined that's kind of where you figure out the difference between millennials and the Zoomers.
Yes.
Do you remember 9/11 or do you not remember 9/11? But I definitely remembered 9/11, and it was quite a phenomenon because that was the time where we could not get enough news. All of a sudden, I remember exactly where I was when the first plane hit, and for minutes that turned into hours, that turned into days, that turned into weeks, we just consumed this. And it was trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
So I take that to now with COVID-19, we can just watch around the clock what's going on, what's changed. And so there's that parallel in that way. But at that time, what I realized, and it took me quite a few months, so this would have been probably March, and it was after September 11th, and I realized that I had this habit. Like I could hear that little spinning breaking news. It didn't matter which one, and what's going on?
Yeah.
And I felt so compelled to figure out what was going on. And then you look at the screen, it's so stress-inducing because there's rarely one story going on.
Yeah.
You've got like 3 or 4 things ticking across there. And so for me, that's when I realized I need to stop. And we're going to talk, even as we talk more about social media, there was a time there wasn't 24/7 news.
Yeah.
And guess what? We survived somehow.
Yes. Yeah.
And so for me, that was a big change. And so I take that same principle even as I think of my social media use. Am I just consuming it? Now we have the FOMO, fear of missing out. And so we didn't have that then, but it was that same idea of we can't just keep watching it around the clock.
So how do you decide what you do look at then? Because like most people watching this probably found it via social media, so there is some good.
Yes.
How do you decide what you look at and what you don't?
Yes, that's a fabulous question. For me, this is what the line I've drawn in the sand. So it's not even news media, but it's also social media.
Yep.
It's articles, podcasts, whatever it might be. I've put this boundary with friends, family, colleagues. If you're going to send me something, tell me why you're sending it to me.
Yes.
I don't have time to read all of the links that everybody could send me, and I'm not going to try to do that. But I'm interested in why you're interested in it,
Yeah.
and why it's something I should be reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is the criteria that I have with anything that's sent to me. And so now most of the people in my life honor that. And I do
Yeah.
the same thing with others. If I'm going to send you something, I'm going to tell you why I'm sending it to you.
Yes.
So that you're not watching or listening to, a whole bunch of news stories, whether it's video or articles.
Mm-hmm.
And just before you know it, 3 hours have passed
Yeah.
just from what I've sent you.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. And thank you for
Yeah.
being one of those people that you text links to every once in a while. It's always helpful when you do explain, hey, I found this helpful because of X. So
Right.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
And Nate, you had something to add on to this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like the social media is the modern day bumper sticker,
Oh, yeah.
which I don't know if you've seen one before.
A bumper?
Yeah, they still have those. But I feel like that's kind of the message, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we wear it, and it sets expectations, right, for who we are, how we interact.
Yeah.
But I think there's some like a desensitization process that happens.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we forget what we're posting, how it makes us look, or the image that it may put on us.
Yeah.
And the other concern I have is in this realm of like the urgent versus the urgency.
Yeah.
Right? We become desensitized to what is actually urgent because we're so used to it coming up, right? As the notifications coming on, the news story, it just over time we're just sort of not alarmed by it anymore.
Yeah.
And we need our alert system, right? We need to be. Fire alarm goes off, siren for a tornado. We actually need to be a little stressed out.
Yeah.
So we go and do something that saves us, right? We move to safety. And so I guess the push there, what I would recommend is, you don't want to mix up what is important, right, with what is urgent.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So in my sermon, I outlined this text. It was Philippians 2:3, and it basically sums up as, "But in humility, consider others as more important than yourselves." And I offered that as a solution to anxiety. Nate, could you kind of unpack this in our modern world a little bit?
Yeah, that's, and that one hits you right between the eyes. I really want to be this guy, right?
Yeah.
I want to be the one that's humble, thinking of others first.
Yeah.
But I am curious, and I do wonder, what would it be like, right, if we, either rehearse this in our minds before each social, interaction. I wonder what would be different.
Ooh, yeah, that's good. That's
I
good.
wonder. But there's a couple of ways that, when it comes to application that I think through. So being a Christian, there's sort of a faith lens, a Christian lens that I look at this verse and the application with, and there's also, I'm a counselor, so the world of psychology kind of helps me make sense of it too. And so maybe I'll kind of unpack them both and see if this is helpful.
That's really good.
From a Christian lens, I look at this verse and I say, and I think to myself, man, I can't do this. I want to, I really want to, but I can't.
Yeah.
But you read further down in the verse, right, about what Christ did.
Yeah.
And I look at that and say, okay, Christ can, right? And this is the way he did it. Listen to some of his language, right? He emptied himself, didn't see equality with God as a thing to be grasped. Humble until death. I can't do that. But as a Christian, I'm being sanctified, right, from what I understand, and that means I'm becoming more Christ-like.
Yeah.
Which is more hopeful, I think. Right, it's more hopeful. But I think, when you look at this verse, it maybe ask the question of, okay, what about in a pandemic? And I think what you can do is just put in a pandemic at the end of the verse, right?
Yeah.
But in humility, consider others as more important than yourselves in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So crossing over, and I won't go too long on this, but crossing over from looking at like a counselor psychological lens, I really borrow from Mark McMinn in this area. He's a psychologist, Christian psychologist, and he wrote a book called The Science of Virtue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he had some things that I thought was really helpful. And one is that humility is one of those words that's really defined by what it's not, right? How am I humble? Well, don't do this, don't do that, right? So I think there's a better way to get it, there's a better definition out there.
Okay.
And what I like about Mark's material is he gives us a definition. And some of it is actually fueled by social science and what's out there. And so he says this is what humility is. It's an accurate view of self. It's concern for others and openness to ideas.
So can you say those three again?
Yeah, so it's accurate view of self.
Yep.
Considering others, right?
Yep.
Concern for others and openness to various ideas.
That's really good. Any immediate, practical ways we can do that tomorrow? Any of those three things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know if you've heard of the Dunning-Kruger cognitive bias, right? Which is a blind spot. It's named after the two psychologists that studied it.
Okay.
One thing that they found in their study was that, so when people learn something, they have a tendency to exaggerate their expertise.
Okay. All right.
And it's interesting because I think the exaggeration can happen at two ends of the spectrum. So people that are actually experts or really know their stuff have a tendency to exaggerate down.
Okay. Yeah,
their expertise.
No, that's true.
And so I think the application personally maybe would be, just have awareness of maybe your blind spots, right? Ask people, what are my blind spots?
Yeah.
What am I missing?
So that makes me think of how I sometimes think on social media is everything I'm sharing is right, and everything everyone else is sharing that I disagree with is wrong, obviously, because I've done my research and I'm an expert. But, everyone kind of thinks that, don't we? A little bit? Is that kind of what you're talking about there?
There's this confidence about it, right? And really what they broke down is that the problem is we know too little to know that we don't know enough. And so it's really not this intentional, narcissistic activity, right?
Yeah.
It's just, we read a little bit, we feel like we know what we know, and part of that limitation is we don't know.
Wow, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah. So, just to I guess sum that up, I think, with combining these lenses, the Christian and looking at psychology, I think the four things I would say in that is first, consider Christ. I think second is know yourself.
Yeah.
Accurately, right?
Yes.
Get to know, and I think that's through these next two steps, which is consider others, and be open, be curious to various explanations or knowledge sources.
That's good. I think that's the opposite of what social media makes me want to do most days. So,
Right.
Sure.
Oh,
Right.
Thank you.
And as you were talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect, it is so prevalent. And so it was interesting, even as we were talking about this webinar and what knowledge we have. And so we've been kind of, teasing Dillon in this, Nate and I have been, because he said, okay, so as experts, and we keep correcting that and saying, no, we're not experts. And as a matter of fact, once we bring up this effect, people are going to be like, wait a minute, they just said, how do you deal with expertise? And so that's something that I think is really important. My area of specialty is anxiety, and I have 20 years of experience in this area.
Wow.
And I would say this, that, how do you know if you're effective, is based on how people are doing, that I've worked with. And, praise the Lord, people I've worked with, have come back and I've watched the growth and all that, but I still don't consider myself an expert.
Yeah.
And so I think that's super important in that whole thing of humility is every year that passes, I'm more aware of what I don't know than what I do know. That I still have so much more to learn. And that's super helpful too, because even as a counselor, I'm not an expert in your life.
Yeah.
Nor should I be, and nor should we approach our profession, or should we approach any profession as I'm an expert into your life.
Yeah.
And so if we can take that posture, we can really come across as more humble, which then begs because we move into the next topic of what do we share then? Because
Yeah.
we do want to share. I mean, social media is not the enemy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of benefits to it. And so here's kind of an area that I would suggest doing is figuring out what your values are, first of all.
Yeah.
And as a Christian, it may look different, may or may not look different than the rest of the world, but what do you value? For me, I would say my walk with Jesus,
Yeah.
kingdom values, people.
Yeah.
Those are my values, spelled out right there. And it's from that, then I make a decision on what my priorities are.
Yeah.
Now, this is the key. Know what your values are. So if you're listening to this, that you can start jotting this down now, but I suggest working on this. Like, what are your values? Values should not change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your priorities need to change. And in the middle of COVID-19, they have to change.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, and there again, I'm back to what I shared at the beginning, options are so important. I need to wake up every day and figure out what my priorities are going to be for that day. And that's the not fun part about this. There's so many things that are not fun about all this, right?
Yeah.
As I state the obvious. I felt like being obvious there but that's one of the things we have to let go of. Every day we have to decide based on our values, but what are our priorities going to be that day? And it needs to change, kind of like what Nate was sharing, like that, what's going to get your most attention that moment? Is it going to be your role as being a dad, as a counselor? What does that look like? And so knowing what those priorities are. And how do you know what your priorities are? Where do you spend your time, treasure, and talents?
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
that's your time, your money, and your giftings.
Yes.
Right?
And
Yeah.
how are you spending them? How are you using those? And so something you can do, and even during this time where your world probably looks different. I can't imagine anybody's not affected right now, is to journal it and just kind of keep track of what does that look like. And does that reflect not your priorities, but does that reflect your values? Because your priorities have to change during this time. Meaning they have to be fluid. I should put it that way. That's probably more accurate. You have to have fluid priorities right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So this wasn't in our notes, but with priorities and living out our values in our priorities, I've heard one of my favorite psychologists is Dr. Peterson. He says that what we prioritize and what we value and what we believe, we can actually find out in our actions more than in our thoughts. So, would you agree with that? One, but two, how would we be able to look at how our actions changed during COVID and what that shows of what we actually prioritize? Do you have any ideas on that or thoughts?
Yeah. And first of all, I would agree with that. It's important because our actions are what impact everybody around us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So absolutely. And yes, under COVID, we do have to think about that a little bit differently. And I would say this, and we're going to get into empathy as part of this webinar, but we have to think about the impact of our decisions on others. And that's kind of the no-brainer part of it.
Yeah.
But we have to think a little bit bigger than that, of not only what is the impact of my actions on the people around, but also knowing that they're going to be at a different place. This is super important. We're in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat.
That's so
Meaning it's not impacting everybody in the same way.
good. Yeah.
And so one of the things that you can do that's really helpful, and that's kind of that prioritizing in different roles, is who needs me right now?
That's good.
And part of that has to be, unless of course it's one of your kiddos, that's a different role, but it has to be this: I can't be the expert over your life, and I can't come in, I do this, like this posture of coming in over you.
Yeah.
And so a simple thing you can do is what would be the most helpful thing I can do for you? And not assume that I know what it is,
Yeah.
but ask that question: how can I empower you? How can I help you?
That's so good.
And that is one of the most beneficial things we can do, because COVID's taken so much from us. And so this is an area that you can get a little bit, even control, I don't mind that word, have a little control back, is that you're able to do that.
That's good. So you talked about how we work with others and how that impacts them. One of the audience questions actually came in and said, do you have any suggestions for how to help a loved one when they're in the middle of an anxiety attack and are resisting you? how could we respond to that? This is a good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Do you want me to grab that one? I can grab that.
Yeah, I mean, we can both.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah.
Hold it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll start, and
sure.
Nate will make it sound better. He'll have a better answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's true.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a fabulous question. And last year we did the anxiety seminar, and so part of what I'm about to share, if whoever asked that question was here, I'm going to kind of be reinforcing that, but I'll take it a little step further. Is my ability, and Nate's going to get into that a little bit when we talk about the brain part of it, the neuroscience, but my ability to remain calm is something I can impart to you.
Okay.
So the first thing we need to do is, if somebody's having super high anxiety, even to the point of a panic attack, because that could be what this person's speaking of, is we can help somebody come out of a panic attack.
Okay.
And what we do is we don't try to fix or change their emotional state. And this is what we'll do, and I'm going to kind of look towards Nate as I'm doing this, just since he's sitting closer to me as an example, is so if Nate's highly anxious, what I'm going to do intentionally is, for just a moment, I'm going to allow my own anxiety to go up just a moment. Because what I'm doing in a quick second is conveying that I understand this is important to you. And so that really quickly connects and says, I'm here with you. Instead of, calm down, there's nothing wrong. He's not ready for that yet. So I kind of let my anxiety just go up a second and kind of be like, okay, heightened awareness. And then I start bringing it down. And the key to doing this is eye contact. Through the eyes, that's how we can impart to somebody a sense of calm.
That's good.
And something you can say to that person is, I know you don't feel like you're okay right now, but I'm okay, so you're okay.
That's good.
No matter what thoughts are racing, no matter what's going on, because I'm okay, you're going to be okay. I'm here with you. And another thing that's super helpful you can do is sit down next to that person. So look, I'm sitting there by Nate, and I would just gently put my hand over his hand.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah. And if somebody's walking away, because that can happen too, you go with the person. And you don't crowd them, because they may be wanting a little bit of that space, and just say, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm okay, so you're okay.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So what if...
Anything you want to add to that, Nate?
No, you said that quite well.
Okay.
You took every single word that I was going to say.
Okay.
I will say this, though. I mean, whoever asked the question, I mean, I can tell from that, as you care, you recognize that emotion, and so that person that's struggling, they got a good friend. I think that's great.
That's really good. It's really good. And does any of that change if it's like a minor or a kid, or is it like if it's your child, like are there things that like their brain is wired differently, or is that all like will that work adults, kids? Like, I'm clueless, so I'm just asking.
What's going on is the same.
Okay.
But your response needs to be a little bit different, because if it's an adult to an adult, like I can sit next to Nate and just my voice, my tone can be very soothing. Now, for a child, if the anxiety is such that you're at all concerned that they can harm themselves or do something harmful, or then you physically have to go in a little bit closer with the kiddo.
Okay. All right.
And then it's the to an adult, it's I'm okay, so you're okay. I'm okay to the kiddo, or the young child, it's like, I'm going to make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
I'm right here.
Okay.
I'm right here.
And so if the child is resisting you, you still have to. Yeah. All right. That's good. Thank you guys for answering that, and whoever asked that question, thank you for asking.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyone else who has questions, feel free to shoot them in.
Yes.
We'll get them on here.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So we were talking about priorities and how that how we're living out our priorities and values, is that increasing or decreasing our stress? So how does that play out on social media, and how can we kind of monitor that a little bit? You somewhat answered this, but I just want to tie the knot on the bow before we move on.
You bet. Well, in social media, we were discussing this in a few days leading up to this webinar, In social media, we pinpointed 3 basic uses. And so I'm going to break this down in those 3 categories.
Yeah.
The first one is personal sharing. I mean, I think that's how Facebook started,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know what it was called, but I don't even think it was called Facebook, right? Wasn't it called something else? I don't know. It was called something, and I think it became Facebook. And there's probably somebody put in the comments and let us know.
I could Google
Just
it.
kind of let us know what that is. But but personal sharing is the first one. Now, here's the thing: is we can use our personal sharing of our lives to either increase or decrease stress for others and for ourselves. Now, one of the ways we're going to increase stress, our own and for others, is what we call the TMI, too much information.
Yep.
And so we're going to share resources at the end of this webinar for counseling, but for the 2 counselors sitting here, like I'll see something posted and I'm like, oh gosh, that would be a really good question to ask a counselor in a counseling session.
Yes, not on social media.
Not on social media, because that's a no-win.
Yeah.
If you post that there, because you're looking for a specific response, and you're probably not going to get it, because it's really difficult to deliver empathy in that way across that medium. And it can leave people feeling uncomfortable, and they don't know what to share or say.
Yeah. I think Brene Brown says, share from your scars, not from your scabs.
Yes.
Right? So.
Yes.
Yeah.
But another thing that we can do that's adding to the stress of others is when we're, I call it boastful sharing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hey, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And while we want to share the positives, that's super important, we can overdo that. And we just have to keep in mind, especially there again, as we've said, during COVID-19, we have to be especially mindful of that, because there again, same storm, not the same boat.
Yeah.
So certain areas, people have more freedom to do things. And if you're in an area of the country that's really, really still quite locked down, that might be difficult to watch.
Yeah.
You might be adding to somebody's frustration.
Oh, that's a good point.
So that's just to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
But we want to share those things, but that kind of the adage, like even a good thing could be too much of something.
Yeah.
And that's where that can go in. Promoting, we promote things, so you got to love this. We did a lot of promotions so that you're here at this webinar, but we can overdo promotions. We have to be careful on that too.
Yeah.
And there again, that's why, the specialty that you have, Dillon, notice I didn't call him an expert, but the specialty that he has is how to manage that. But we can go overboard with the promotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we just have to be careful about that of, oh my gosh, I got to go to this, I'm missing out on this, all the things that we can be involved in. So we just have to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
And then here's the biggie, here's the big stress one, is persuasion. When we use our social media as a way that we are trying to convince others to agree with us. This is where we can really raise somebody's stress level, especially when we become really adamant and forceful about doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we put conditions on, to be connected to me, you have to agree with this and this and this. And so that's the big one that we have to just be really, really, really careful about. And here's a quick little tip that I suggest doing, and on whatever social media platforms you're involved in, is do a quick little audit of what you've been posting. And back to the values and the priorities, does it reflect who you are? So if somebody went on I'll just use Facebook as an example. If somebody went on your Facebook page that did not know you and watched your page for, let's say, 24 hours, what would be the impression of who you are? What would they think of who you were? And is that what you'd want? Because it's really easy to think, well, gosh, it's just filling in the pieces of people that already know me. So like if I looked at you guys' pages, I would know if you put something on there I wasn't sure about, I would fill in the blank with something really positive because I know both of you. You're my friends and colleagues.
Yeah.
But if it was a stranger, would I give them the same benefit of the doubt? Probably not. If I saw a lot of things on there that were really just really kind of in people's face,
Yeah.
I would think, wow. I wonder what they would be like in person if they're just, being so forceful with their view. So I think that's really important to take a look at. Is just kind of do an audit. Is this who I am, and is this how I want the world to view me?
That's good. That's really good. Before we move on, we got to follow up to that first question of when people have a panic attack. And it's, what if your only contact with this person is over the phone instead of giving, in person with eye contact?
Yeah, especially in this time where it is on the phone. It's the same thing. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do the eye contact. Although, thank goodness, with our devices, if that phone call can turn into, FaceTime, or you can get it, there again, as counselors, whether we wanted to or not, we are now in the world of telehealth.
Yes, you've pivoted.
And we do a lot of telehealth counseling, so it's that same thing. So then you're going to use your voice more than you're going to be able to use your eye contact.
Okay.
But it's that same thing of over the phone or across, whether it's Skype or whatever you're on, Zoom, whatever it is initially what's important is to let them know that you understand how upset they are.
Yeah.
Without judgment.
That's good.
This is your experience of what's going on. And I'm gonna allow myself to go there with you for just a minute.
Yeah.
And then from that, because I've intentionally brought up my own emotion, I can then start dialing yours down.
That's good.
And over the phone, you're going to probably need to be more vocal about it.
Yeah.
When I'm doing that, whether it's friends or it's in my role as a counselor, I tell the person that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just the way I like to do things. I like to be really clear on why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'll say, I'm going to meet you where you're at. I said, and then I am able to bring you down.
Yeah.
And meaning bringing your emotional state down.
That's good.
Yeah. Like a play-by-play almost, sorry.
Yes, yeah.
That's good. If that doesn't work on the first time, like going up in volume and then talking back down, you just do it over and over?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely, you can
all
do
right.
that if they're not quite ready to go there yet.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And all right, well, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And glad to, if you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah. If it's in person, and I think you can do this a little bit, if you can see the person, so they're again over Zoom or whatever it is. Breathing is a really big way to do that as well too.
Okay.
So typically when somebody's really anxious to the point of a panic attack, their breathing is way up here, and not deep and it's not slow. So that's another way too.
Yeah.
And there again, tell them what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you can match their breathing and you can bring their breathing down. And so I will intentionally do that when I'm working with someone. I'll allow my breathing, I will breathe like they're breathing for just a second. And I'll tell them I'm doing that. I said, I'm going to meet you with your breathing. I said, see, I can match your breathing. I'm going to have you start matching mine.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Wow.
So you can do that a little bit over, as long as you can see the person, as long as they're able to see that.
Okay. Would it be possible to do it audibly if you could put your phone on speaker or something, they could actually hear your breathing, or is it just not worth trying?
I mean, the phone, I feel like it amplifies breathing anyway.
Yeah.
Sure.
Whereas you're in person, you're going to be more talking about, okay, I'm breathing in now, but over the phone, you might actually hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think there
Alright.
can be some benefit to, listen to my breath or hear
Sure.
how I'm taking this in. See if you can match me maybe.
Yeah. Because really what you're doing is an exaggeration.
Yeah.
And that's, and you're letting the person know that's what you're doing. You're exaggerating what you're doing for their benefit.
Yeah.
So in any way that you're able to do that is beneficial.
Yeah.
That's so good, and I'm learning so much. So this is outstanding. So me as a digital marketer, I'm definitely not an expert at it. I've only been doing it a year, but I know that most of the marketers out there that share my position, not all of them work for as well-meaning companies as I do. Very grateful for the one that I get to work for. Their intention is to stress you out. And it's usually to stress you out enough to buy something. So, and when we do that, I talked about this a little bit in my sermon, but I want to dive deeper. They're triggering our fight or flight instinct. And I guess all marketers are doing it. It's just the problem is that digital marketing follows us in our pocket 24/7. So, Nate, could you kind of dive into the neuroscience a little bit of that, of like the stress and the fight or flight instinct and all that?
Yeah, get under the hood a little bit, right?
Yeah. Talk about.
So, I think maybe the way that maybe unpack this a little bit will be, kind of talking about the system, and then maybe tie it back to the social media content. I don't know if everybody saw the flyer. I'm sure they did for this seminar, but I really liked whoever picked that out, like the design team, or I'm not even using the right words, but that was just beautiful. Like, I loved it. It was sort of like the hands in the stressed out, and it's like, and I kind of want to use that as a framework for how we talk about this. And meaning we have players, and then we have a drama that's playing out. And the players are the stress steroids. Okay, so we have epinephrine, which is kind of what you're talking about, right? It's the thing that's that quick shot. It's a very powerful, right? It gets the heart rate going. The breathing is increased.
Okay.
And the other one is cortisol.
Okay.
Think longer lasting. Okay, so it gets you alert and kind of keeps you alert.
Okay.
And it has other functions. I mean, all these have other functions, which is sort of the danger of stress, right? If they're not taking care of what they normally take care of, and they're now on stress all the time. I mean, that's the danger of it. But cortisol, I mean, think of it like a soldier who's on watch, right?
Yeah.
He needs just that drip of cortisol to keep him just aware. And the last one that would add into the players would be this neuroepinephrine.
Okay.
Which I'm learning about. I'm not quite an expert. But from what I understand, it's through the nerve fibers is how it works.
Okay.
And one of its functions is actually narrowing the blood vessels, right? So that increases the blood pressure, which increases strength, power, from my understanding. And so the way the brain works on stress, and I think there's a picture or a slide of the brain there. And I'll kind of talk to the drama here. So the amygdala, which is the little almond-shaped thing with a couple arrows pointing towards it, it senses the stress. It sees the stress going on. And what it does is then it sort of delivers a message to the hypothalamus, which goes through the pituitary gland, which goes to the adrenal gland, which is just above the kidney, and just tells it to, hey, release these steroids. We need it. Right?
Okay.
For whatever's going on, we need it. Amygdala is kind of that the general there.
Okay.
Right? It's kind of its job. And so I've been reading this book. I'm going to transition a little bit here, but keep on the same topic. I've been reading this book by Catherine Pittman and Elizabeth Carl. I hope I'm saying that right. But Rewiring the Anxious Brain is the book they wrote. And it's just excellent if anybody wants a resource. But what they unpacked and talked about really in depth was the amygdala. And they talked about two different pathways. So what I described there of all these stress steroids being released through the system, Catherine Pittman would call that the amygdala pathway. But there's actually another pathway that triggers stress and stress steroids, and that's through they call it the cortical pathway, but that's basically amygdala is watching the cerebral cortex like a TV. Okay. And so what you're thinking and how you're making sense of situations can actually trigger through the amygdala now. Okay. Amygdala holds the fight or flight response, so everything's going through it. Okay. So the amygdala's, unconsciously, right, out of our purview, is essentially trying to save us, and it's also watching what you're watching and trying to save you. Okay. So there's a number of ways that the amygdala really triggers that response.
Yeah. So us as digital marketers, we trigger it when we put out these headlines that have all caps or crazy words or whatever.
It's crazy what triggers it, right?
Yeah.
Just all caps, right?
Yep.
The amygdala's going, ooh, that's important.
Yeah, we got to watch out. 3 exclamation marks. Oh my goodness.
Well,
what
that's
is
another
happening?
dose of epinephrine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But so, the social media aspect, what you're talking about, the amygdala pathway would be, we're in a pandemic,
Yeah.
Right? And so there is an underlay of stress already, right? We all have it, we're all experiencing it. And then you're online, and through the cortical pathway, you're now stressed out, right? You're clicking on those things.
Yeah.
And so you've got stress just on top of stress, right? Which leads to that fatigue, which leads to all kinds of not fun stuff.
Yeah. So if for most of us, I'm guessing a lot of us, are getting an unhealthy dose of that amount. What are some signs that our levels are like a danger zone a little bit there?
Yeah. So can you ask that again?
Huh?
Can you ask that question again?
Yeah. So we've been in this cycle ever since the pandemic hit. And,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of us beforehand, especially people my age, but where we're seeing these headlines, we're getting stressed out. For the first month and a half, I was checking this website that had the case numbers of the U.S. all the time.
Yeah.
How do we know when that tendency to just keep looking at those things, or the cortisol that's been going on in our brain? I think I'm using that term right.
Yeah.
But how do we know when that's gone too far and we need help?
Yeah, I think the challenging part of that is we may not recognize it.
Okay.
Because we're beautiful creatures, right? Like the way God created us to adapt to things is wonderful. The danger in that, though, is we may be adapting to it, and it's creating new normal, and we're not aware of it.
Yeah.
Which the real terrifying part of that is, burnout comes a lot quicker and without warning.
Yeah.
So I think it's maybe going back to that humility piece a little bit, and I think letting others recognize that the pattern changes. Like my wife has done this a lot with me.
Okay.
Like, you're still on there. Like, what are you doing online? What are you doing on your phone? And I'm like, well, I'm looking at Yahoo News. I'm looking at numbers. I need something, right?
Yeah.
And when we start losing our ability to enjoy the things that we normally enjoy,
Oh, yeah, that's good.
that's a sign. And this kind of falls in the self-care we're going to talk about later, but I'll just go there super quick. Another way too is if you're spending a lot of time on this, give people around you permission to point it out to you. Because if you are snapping at people, if you've been spending a lot of time, not just even on the social media, but gaming, all of the things we can be doing in the digital age, if it's starting to change your personality. And then the last one I would share on that is, and this is an exercise I love to do with people, is do you know where you carry your stress? And most of us carry it in a specific area of our body.
Yep.
And for those who are believers, so it's a little easier because you can do it as a prayer.
Okay.
And just really, you can just literally ask through prayer the Holy Spirit to show you where you carry it. And then just become aware, because that part of your body is going to become, it's going to become painful.
Okay.
And so pre-pandemic, if you had just a little bit of pain in your lower back, because it's a common area, there's a lot of pain there. And part of it is the stress of it, but you're building up the cortisol too. And so just being aware of that you may have, and when we get to the self-care part at the end, kind of towards the end of this webinar, we're going to a little bit more of what to do with some of those things. But that's how you can know that that it's going too far.
Okay.
That's another way. And the biggie really is letting people speak into your life and tell you.
Yeah. I know one of the first things I tend to do is I get super irritable or I get super quiet, and it probably goes one after another. But I've noticed that, and I carry all of my stress right here. So I've learned that from a couple years of counseling. But So Nate, I cut you off. I think you still had a bit more on that brain slide. I think. Did I or
no? I think we're
okay.
We're right
Perfect. That's awesome. So, Brenda, actually, you know what? We're not going to have time for this before the break. So let's ask a bit of a different question. Work. How do we know, or how can we, because a lot of us have transitioned to working at home, what are some different stressors that are going to come from that? And how can people, tomorrow, what are some applications that they can do just to improve, how they fight off stress during work? Or, anything like that. Brenda or Nate, what do you guys
Yeah.
got?
Well, one of the things, and I don't think this is just specifically work-related, but under this, whatever we're going to call this season under the pandemic,
Yeah.
first things is, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert?
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
extremely important. And what can happen under stress is, for an introvert, they may pull back even farther. And I know when this first started, there was all those little clever memes of like the introverts are loving this, which I don't know how I feel about that. I mean,
Yeah.
all right, I know there's some humor in that, and that's okay. But so they have to be careful with that because they still need that connection. And extroverts need that connection too. And here's the important one where it comes together, is it's meaningful, significant connection.
Okay.
You still need that. An area of stress that I know that I have been getting hit hard with, and I have to be real careful is, and there again, yes, I'm going to catch the irony of it because we are on Zoom right now, is I am having Zoom fatigue. So I'm so glad that we're here.
Yeah.
When we were starting to plan this, we had no idea if the three of us were going to be able to be, together doing this. So
Yeah, we
I
talked about
love,
locking each other into separate
yes,
rooms. And,
I mean, I
throwing
love
Nate
that we're here in
basement.
the same room. Thank goodness. But it's a thing, and here's why it's a thing. In the next segment, we're going to talk more about empathy. But it's really difficult to read all of the nonverbal cues
Yeah.
in communication. And so there's the stressor of so many more of us that are doing things online.
Yeah.
Now, some people, that's their job, and they've been online for quite a while. So I would say this, that one of the biggest stressors is you have to have some real life contact with people off of.
Yeah. So it's not possible to get that super meaningful on Zoom?
You can have some meaningful conversation, but even if you're not super high empathy, as far as like if we think of it as like the gift of empathy, which oftentimes as a counselor, I know that's one of my gift areas. But reading all of that information through a screen is going to, yes.
Yeah, the nonverbal cues, the
Yes.
leaning forward, yeah.
Yes. And the other thing too, and there again, I don't want to jump too far ahead into the self-care stuff, but the stuff I share now, I'll just skip over at the end or go at it a different way, is back to the prioritization of our different relationships. You've got to have time, downtime. So if you're a Christian, that is time of meditating on the Word, of worship, and that's super important, but it's super easy if you're all at home to put that on the wayside.
Yeah.
And then you need to have time with your significant relationships and schedule it, or it's not going to happen. And you have to, even the extroverts, you have to have some time where it's just you.
Yeah. Okay.
And so part of that is even maybe having to be a little more deliberate and intentional and schedule those things in, because I think that's a bigger challenge right now to do that.
How much does diet and exercise play into it? How can that help? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think being aware of what goes into your body is important. I've heard some jokes about, we're gaining the COVID-19, which I think happens, right? The more stressed we are, the more we're trying to find ways to deal with it. But there's certain things we can't do. Normally healthy things or normal routines in which diet and exercise is a part of it. And, that's blown up, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it impacts it greatly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that awareness piece, right? Of just.
Yeah.
And I was thinking as she was talking, is just this self-compassion idea, within reason, right? But it's, hey, this is pretty messed up. Like, this is unusual at best, right? And so that means like things are gonna be thrown off. Expectations are gonna change. Your values may not change, but your expectations may need to become a little more realistic.
Okay,
right?
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Has it impacted your guys' like exercise routines? I know mine has completely changed.
Yeah.
What's exercise again?
Yeah. No, it's definitely one of those things that's been.
Can we burn calories over Zoom?
Yeah.
I'd like to know that. Like somebody do a study on that.
depends on how irritated you get at someone, but no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I suppose, right? Yeah.
I did try to do push-ups in between sessions. Just to get blood flowing.
Yeah.
That's creative. I like
my
that.
concern of, I thought, I got to start somewhere. Maybe this will kickstart something more elaborate. I'll let you know when I get there. But
all right. Well, that's awesome. That's really good. Well, so we've got a break that we're going to go to right now.
Yeah.
Sparrow's not worrying about tomorrow or the trouble to come. The lily's not thinking about the season, the drought or the flood. The tree that's planted by the water isn't fazed by the fire. Why should I be when you take good care of me? Oh, you take good care of me. You know what I need before I even ask a thing. And I'm carried in your hands with a love that never ends. I'm covered by your love no matter what the future brings. Oh, 'cause you take good care of me. The sun's not worried about the winter, for soon it shall pass. The light's not thinking about the darkness or the shadow cast. The heart that's planted in forgiveness doesn't dwell in the past. Why should I be when you take good care of me? Oh, you take good care of me. You know what I need before I even ask a thing. And I'm carried in your hands with love that never ends. I'm covered by your love no matter what the future brings. 'Cause you take good care of me. I know there must be more, but I can't get past your kindness. I know there's got to be more, but I can't get past your goodness. I know there must be more, but I can't get past your kindness. I know there's got to be more, but I can't get past your goodness. When you take good care of me, oh, you take good care of me. Oh, you know what I need before I even ask a thing. And I'm carried in your hands with love that never ends. I'm covered in your love no matter what the future brings. Oh, you take good care of me.
Well, welcome back. I hope that break was good, and I hope that we're ready to dive back in because we've got some more great stuff going on. So, Brenda, what I was going to ask you before the break, and I'm guessing you're very glad I didn't make you put it into 5 minutes, so this trend of the neuroscience that we explained before of our cortisol and our epinephrine kind of taking over our brains, what is all of this doing to emotional maturity? And, like, how are people acting it out? Just give us a framework for that.
Absolutely. Yes, when we think of emotional maturity, one of my favorite resources is the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
Yeah.
Phenomenal material, Pete Scazzaro. And so I highly recommend that. And so he puts it into categories. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to share a little bit about that because I think it's so important. Mm-hmm. And it's even more so, I think, with what's going on with COVID-19. And so he breaks it down. The first category is what he would call an emotional infant. And that's really hard to hear, and it's even harder to look at the description. This is not easy to look at. And we can all have times where we're falling into any of these areas. So an emotional infant is somebody who struggles with delayed gratification. So it's instant gratification. I want what I want, and I want it now. Really hard stuff in the middle of a pandemic. Another area is they are inconsiderate, insensitive, ouch. They rarely show their feelings or even identify them, but when they do, in a healthy way. And so what this looks like specifically online is name-calling and belittling. So I think an important tip to share in this is if I've just described somebody in your life, if the relationship you have with this person is online only, this is where mute and block comes in. And I get asked this question a lot, and that's what I do. If I do not have an opportunity to have a real life off of the digital relationship where I can model or something, and I'm not claiming that I've got it all figured out myself, not at all, but helping somebody that's really stuck as emotional infant, because you can't really do it online.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to model that. So I would just encourage you to have that boundary. The next category is an emotional child. And here's some things that Pete would say about that person. They take things personally. And so online, that's real obvious and evident. It's when you post something and somebody jumps on there and says, thinks that you posted it about them.
Directly at them.
Now,
Okay.
it can be. Now, if you did that, that's called you were just being passive-aggressive, so it does happen. But this person has a difficult time seeing that that's not about them. They see it as a direct affront to them. When they don't get their way, they resort to sarcasm, complain, revenge. And so what this looks like specifically online, but then of course this can show up in person too, is it's the temper tantrums. And what's really going on with this individual is they have not learned how to modulate their emotions. And there again, you got two counselors up here. In this category, if this is you or somebody around you, this is one of those areas where getting some counseling would be super helpful, because we can learn and get stuck in some habits where we just never learned how to, it's called self-regulate, how to calm all of that down. And Nate did a beautiful job of talking about how that all fires in our brain. If we don't know how to calm it down, we don't know how to calm it down. And then we just keep acting it out. And oftentimes that's where people start distancing themselves, which makes it even worse. Then the tantrum gets worse. So it's this cycle that can happen.
As a parent, would you recommend going to counseling with that child, separate from that child, to the same counselor? What would that look like if it was a child that was throwing the temper tantrums? I guess that's
if it's the child throwing the temper tantrums, usually, and there again, because I get to work with the kiddos, is usually I start with the kiddos, but more often than not, because what we're talking about is play therapy, usually we work with the whole family. So I'm going to work with the adult and then work with the child.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
And in this area, in these categories, Pete's really talking about adults that are stuck in these categories.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So that's important to say. So like a kiddo is going to be throwing some tantrums because their brain's still developing.
It makes sense that a child would be an emotional child. That's a good point.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay, so our next category is the emotional adolescent. Quick to make judgments. This is a huge one. This one gets played out a lot on social media, which is if I see something that reminds me of a particular group, it's all people are this. And so I'm going to use kind of a more lighthearted one, although I apologize for those that are still grieving that we don't have sports at the level that we do. So I apologize. This might be a little hard to hear.
I'm ready.
So sports teams are a great way. So if you were raised in, I'm just going to throw a city out there, Philadelphia just came to mind. So if you're an Eagles fan, So if you're an Eagles fan and you're a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan, there's a team out there where you believe all the fans from that team are horrible out of your limited exposure to X number of fans.
Yeah.
Unless you have met everybody in that fan base. And that's what this is. That's that quick to judgment. So if you see somebody show up on whatever that team might be, if you see somebody showing up on social media and they have, that cap on, oh, they're a jerk, oh, they're whatever that is. That's that quick to judgment. And that's really damaging when we don't allow people to be unique individuals, but we decide all people that like that or somebody that looks a certain way, all people are that. So that's the emotional adolescent. The unforgiveness, huge. Really difficult for the emotional adolescent to forgive. Preoccupied with self. And
That's good.
And I kind of already shared this, so which is they take one story and generalize it.
Yeah.
And there again, what can happen then on social media, just online, is confirming our biases.
Yeah.
So if I believe all blah, blah, blah fans are this, that's what I'm looking for.
So you're going
And-
to follow all the Nebraska fanboy pages that bash on Iowa fans if you're that
Right.
to hit close to home.
Right, exactly. Then all of a sudden, all this group is this.
Yep. Yeah.
And we have to challenge those. We must challenge those because that's not humility, for starters, which is like, I think that I know everything about a group of people. Absolutely. Do not.
Yeah.
And so the last group, the group that I want to spend a little bit more time on, is the healthy group here, which is the emotional adult. And here's some of the things we can say about the emotional adult. Respect and love others without having to change them. Easier said than done. Talk about needing the work and help of the Holy Spirit to do that, which is basically if the three of us were sitting here and we didn't agree on something, the three of us could respectfully disagree about it. I can hold my position unless you gave me a really convincing argument and I choose to change it, but we don't have to change how we view it. That's one of the big things as far as like on social media. And there again, kind of already said this, but I can disagree without becoming adversarial, meaning not the name calling. And then Nate, I think, has already touched on this quite a bit, but this is important. I know and can articulate my strengths and my weaknesses. One of the beautiful things about an emotional adult is we can say what our weak areas are. And we don't try to hide them. One way people can hide that is an inability to apologize and an inability to just admit you made a mistake.
Yeah.
And if you're not accustomed to doing that, it can be really uncomfortable to do. So, and just another little item I wanted to share on an emotional adult, are deeply convinced that they are loved by Christ and want to reflect his love to the world. Love their neighbor as themselves. This is super important because it goes back to, once again, what does your presence online say about you? Is that what you would want it to say?
Yeah.
So here's some tips, because I want to focus on what it means in the emotional adult. I have some things that are really important to do. It's take ownership for your own thoughts, feeling, goals, and actions. And so it's that you can't make me feel, think, or see something a certain way. I have to own that that's my perspective. Humility, we've talked quite a bit about that, so I'll kind of move on from that. Delayed gratification is huge.
Yeah.
And it's not fun. Nate's heard me say this before. I even sometimes say it like this, because this word feels like it should be said like delayed gratification. And I say it like that because it's like the most unfun thing to do.
Yeah.
And so it should be said like that. Like, you shouldn't love to do it, but it's one of those things that's important to do. So I always encourage people, and I have to like cheer myself on to do this, is intentionally do that.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that social media does is everything is instant.
Yep.
It's, I want what I want and I can have it now. I don't have to wait.
Yeah.
And if we are not able to do that, we become really, really impatient with people. And that's where we can lash out really quickly. So that is something really important to practice. It's important to practice with your family and those around you. Here's one of my favorite words to say: lament.
Yes.
I teach workshops on this one. If you've never spent any time on lament, this is one of them. We're going to give you our contact information at the end of this. Reach out to me. That's one of my favorite things. I could do it 2 hours just on lament. But lament is simply this. I love Michael Card. He wrote a book called Sacred Sorrow. Okay. And he says this about lament. We do not lament because we're in despair. We lament because we know he is there. I love that. I love that phrase. And it's simply this. When something hurts, we have got to pour it out before God, because I can't carry it. I can't dump it on Nate. It's not going to...
Yeah.
He can't carry it for me either. And in this season, we have to intentionally take it before the Lord and say that this hurts and this is frustrating. And if it hurts, it needs to be lamented.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to pair that together. And there again, what's been taken from each person is different in this season.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we just have to be aware of that.
So we have a question.
Oh, great. Okay.
So how do you recommend going about relationships with people who are not emotional adults while maintaining healthy boundaries and protecting yourself from getting hurt?
That's a great question.
Outstanding question.
That is a very good question. Yes. How I would respond to that is this. First of all, putting people in a certain category is super important. This is even beyond COVID and beyond all the social media. What is the context of the relationship? So first of all, you have to be able to answer that question. So I'm going to pick on the guys here for just a second. I'm going to say Nate is a deep, dear friend of mine who I want to make sure that I keep a relationship with.
Yes.
Because we've known each other a long time. If we were related in some way, I would need to. So like if he was my brother, cousin, whatever, I would be like, he's going to be in my life. I need to figure out how to do this relationship. Okay, so Dillon, on the other hand, is somebody more of an acquaintance that I'm not sure is going to be in my life.
Yeah.
There's no ongoing connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and why does this matter? Because how I'm going to go about this is a little bit different. How I need to do this is a little bit different. I'm going to, because we only have so much energy we can invest in all of our relationships. I'm going to invest more over this direction with Nate.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is I hopefully have the opportunity to talk to him and model in the areas that I may be more advanced. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to look for areas where he's more advanced than I am.
Oh, interesting.
Because I don't want it to just be one way. I want it to be reciprocal.
Okay. And all of that takes a lot of work.
It does take a lot of work.
So that's why we only do it with specific people who we can.
Absolutely.
Who are we're going to keep a relationship with. Okay.
Absolutely. And so then the direction of, so if it was more of an acquaintance, your direction then, Dillon, I'm going to utilize more of the boundaries. I'm going to think first more boundaries of what do I need to do so that whatever you're doing is less harmful towards me or towards those around me.
Okay.
And then once I've got some great boundaries in place, prayerfully, because that's what is required in all of this, I'm going to look for opportunities to model to you. Hopefully things that are healthier. And in both relationships, I'm going to remember you got to where you are because this is what you learned in relationships. And I need my own learning, but there might be some areas where I can impart something that might be just a little further down the line.
Okay. That's good. How much does that change if, like, say, so I'm someone that you don't see having a, well, okay, we're obviously speaking figuratively here, but someone who you don't see having that longer-term relationship, like keeping them in your life intentionally, what if it's someone you're forced to be around, like your boss, or maybe it is a family member, but it's just a family member that you don't want to be around? Like, does that change the approach at all? How does that affect?
It certainly changes the what you do from the standpoint of if you're dealing with somebody that has power over you.
Okay, so a
Because that's
boss.
what you're talking
Yeah.
about, because you used the example of a boss.
Yeah.
So that becomes a little bit different then.
Mm.
And it may be that you're not in a position to really help that person.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then it is, what do you do on the receiving end of that? And at some point, in some of those relationships, we have to take a look at, is this a healthy environment you want to remain in?
Yeah. Or do you just begin looking for a different position somewhere else?
Because
Yeah.
at some point, you do have to take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's good. Okay. I cut you off in the middle of listing off a few tips for becoming an emotional
not at all.
adult.
This is good.
Yeah.
I would suggest doing the social media fast.
Yeah.
That's important. And, like I said earlier, Facebook hasn't always been around.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would that look like if you just turned it off
Yeah.
and just took a break from it? And that's important. And then the next one I wanted to touch on is empathy.
Mm.
And this is my favorite one to talk about for emotional adults. And this has been interesting because over the years, I've had people ask me about this thing called empathy. Is it something that only certain people can do, or is it something you can learn?
Mm.
And so I'm going to preface it with this, which is, if you've done the Gallup Strength Finders, empathy is on there. It's my number one on Strength Finders.
Okay.
And so is there a gift of it that perhaps just empathy comes more natural? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to agree with that's certainly valid. But is it something that you can learn? And I would say absolutely yes. And
good.
so that's what I wanted to run through and this is something that even in the difficult relationships you were just talking about, Dillon, this can be helpful.
Okay.
Is sometimes if we can extend empathy
Mm-hmm.
to individuals, we can help them grow up through those categories I just shared.
Mm.
Because for some individuals, the reason they're stuck in those earlier stages, and I'm talking about adults stuck in these earlier stages, is they have not had an opportunity to see healthier relationship modeled.
Mm. Okay.
And they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we're going to run through the empathy stuff. I love this area. All right. And this is a definition that I want to start with that's probably just from experience and a lot of reading. It's kind of one of those little Brenda-isms moments here. But I like this a lot. Empathy sits with someone through hard emotions and does not turn the attention back to self.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I like about talking about empathy. And that's the key to empathy, is not turning the attention back to yourself, which is super easy to do. And by the way, when we do that, when we're sharing and then somebody kind of jumps in and shares something, there's nothing wrong with that, just in general, because it's called normalizing. There's a word for that. So like if I share a story and you jump in there and Dillon, you're like, oh, Brenda, that reminds me of, and you share something, that's nothing wrong with that, but that's just not empathy.
Yeah.
That means, hey, we have something similar.
Yeah.
You know, we have a connection here. And those are good, by the way. That's something else, but those are important to have. It's just not empathy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of run through this a little bit, and guys, feel free to jump in and ask questions.
Yeah.
So the plan on growing for empathy. The first one is simply called Perk Up, which is look for chances to extend empathy and also schedule time for it. So it just starts with a desire to have more empathy. Just starts with that. And it's kind of twofold. And there again, through prayer, the Lord can help us to be more mindful of it. And then I always say this, we should schedule time for it.
Okay.
And it's important to be on both ends. So like, it would be really important to say, Nate, and there again, I always tell people what I'm doing. I don't make people ever guess. So it's like, I can tell something's bugging Nate and be like, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah. Okay.
And then I would expect and hope, the same in return as friends.
Okay. Are there relationships where you just give out of that?
As a counselor, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In my professional relationship, absolutely. Do I have some relationships with individuals who are probably struggling more at the emotional infancy? Yes. Am I giving them a ton of empathy and then it's coming back? Yes. Yes. And I know that going in,
That's good.
eyes wide open kind of thing. And it's okay to do that because I think that's what they need.
Yeah.
And I do watch some progress in that.
Yeah, and I feel like when the radar is up or the antennas are up for empathy, it's kind of like when you're shopping for a new car, you just see it everywhere.
Yeah.
I think that can happen, right? You see it. So if anybody's worried about the opportunity, don't. It will come to you.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. That's so well said. So the next is acknowledge. So acknowledge is simply this. Somebody's sharing something of significance. It's usually an event or a story. This is what's important. Believe them. It's their experience. So here's the key, is to not judge it. This is, by the way, this is not easy to do. So somebody's starting to share something. We'll just use the sports one again, because this is super easy. Is somebody sharing a significant event of, they were at whatever football game. And what's really easy to do is to start replaying in our own mind stories that are similar. Or to start judging the story. So like Dillon, if you're sharing a story with me, well, it's obvious Dillon doesn't know much about football, all this tape. So part of it is just simply shut the tape off.
Okay.
And it takes practice.
Yeah. It
takes practice to do that. Just shut it off. And so which comes to the next one here, which is the resist. What I'm looking for, so if you're sharing something with me, Dillon, is it's not my reaction to your experience, it's your experience.
That deserves the focus
Yes.
of the conversation.
And that's not easy to do because I'm thinking about how I would react if I were in your shoes.
Yeah.
But that's not what I'm going for. It's how are you reacting? Something as silly as this. Not silly, but I'll just use this. It's like, okay, this new tumbler here.
Yeah.
So if you were talking about this, true empathy says this, like, I'm hearing about this for the first time through your lens, not my own experience with this object.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what I'm aiming for, is I want to hear about this as if I'd never heard about this item before.
Okay.
That's true empathy. And then, so you've been sharing. The next step would be, I would express to you gratitude. Thank you for sharing. And that one's really big because for many people, and I know I've been on the receiving end of this, meaning I've been looking for somebody to extend empathy to me, is sometimes it took a lot for somebody to share. And they just need to simply hear, like, thank you for sharing that. Not, the story was too long, or it was too this or too that. And that can be just right there alone is such a gift to give to somebody. Like, they stayed with me, they listened to my whole story, and extending that. And then the next step is to show interest. Am I understanding correctly, and fill in the blank, to make sure that you understood what's going on with them. And here's the key is a story is complete when you can tell the meaning. And meaning requires emotion and thought. And there again, since Nate was sharing this way, by the way, we know how we feel about something before we know how we think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Because every experience goes flying through the amygdala first. And so for those who are not sure if they're really good at the feeling stuff, you are, by the way. Because you have an amygdala, and so you have the feeling part of it. But that's how we can help somebody, is if we can help them say, this is the meaning, this is why this was significant. Then we've landed on empathy.
That's good.
And I shared that, so we've got to the meaning. And then affirm them. This is really important too, is point out something positive about them. So like if you're sharing a struggle right now, since I've been using as an example, Dillon, and earlier you had even said something about, like, you can get frustrated easily.
Oh, yeah, irritable.
That would be irritable. I would point that out to you and say, you just shared that. I know you've been working on not being irritable. I caught that you weren't as irritable as you were sharing that.
Oh, that's good.
So I'd point that out to you. Right?
Yeah.
Look how good that feels.
Yes. And then here's the fun part, because now we get to take some action. And this is, if it's a situation where you're struggling with something, we can take an action step now, which is this: how can I empower you? And it's never this of, this is what you need to do.
Okay.
It's how can I empower you? How can I best help you out? Because then you still have, you're still holding the reins of your life. I'm not stepping in as an expert into your life.
Yeah, you're giving me a chance to tell you how you can help me. That's good. Okay.
Yeah, that's extremely important in empathy, because we want to jump in and fix and give advice.
Yeah.
And that gets rid of a lot of the empathy we've just been building. So it's like, hey, what do you need from me?
Okay. I'm taking notes as a husband right now.
Yeah.
A fresh husband.
Yes. Yes. What can I do to be helpful?
Yeah.
Not, this is what you need.
Mm.
And there again, this is a silly thing. Nate's heard me say this a million times. Help is only help when it's helpful. Let that sink in for just a second. Help is only help when it's helpful. That's important.
Somebody can tweet that after.
Yes, right? And now guess what? We've reached the point where if you want to share how you feel about their experience, go for it. But look at all the other things you did first.
Yeah.
But that's the part where we undermine empathy. We jump in with that really early. Not helpful.
That's good.
And so just, just a couple of last little things on this area.
Yeah.
Empathy never says this. Empathy never says, oh, that reminds me of, because then I've just turned it back to me.
Yeah.
Oh, Dillon, thanks. Oh, that reminds me. No. Empathy does not give pep talks. So kind of back to that first point I shared, which is empathy will just sit with somebody even when it's rough. Not, hey, I'm uncomfortable because you're not feeling great and I'm trying to pep talk you out of it. Empathy never pep talks. Empathy is humble. It never comes across as an expert over another person's life. Yeah.
That's good.
So those are some areas.
Yeah. Empathy is so critical and so missing in a lot of our culture, especially like, Twitter only gives 200 and change characters you can use in a tweet. You can't show empathy in X number of characters very well.
Yeah.
So it's tough to exercise that in the world. So thank you for sharing that. We did get one audience question in.
Okay.
How do you manage the stress of caring for an aging parent and still caring for your own family? The pandemic has only emphasized this struggle. So you have an aging parent and you have a family. How do you take care of them both?
Yeah. Again, I just hear a big heart there. The person sharing, they just have that value of family is very high for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's that's already the first step. You're probably already doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know, the pandemic and the ways that we interact with family members maybe has changed a little bit. And so I think maybe there's creativity in that.
Yeah.
Right, of how to do that. And I think creativity even helps sort of heal some of that stress within yourself when you do that. I think also, just looking at, what that stress is, right? Naming it, right? Giving it a title, finding the meaning of why that's stressful. And I get it. My wife's family lives in town. We're close with everybody. And so there is that dynamic, right? How do I care for my own family, let alone, be helpful? And some people are just naturally wired that way, and for others it's work.
Yeah.
But again, I think part of this pandemic is some self-compassion, some grace that I don't know if you're doing it well or not. We're all surviving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If they're still breathing and eating 3 meals a day, they're doing all right.
Right.
A little bit there.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
And we do have to lower, and I love what you shared on that. We do have to lower the expectations in this season. We just do. And there again, back to something we shared earlier, I think is important, is when you set your priorities. A part of that is when you're stepping into that role, then is the child to your parents. Something that can be really helpful to do is, if that's where your priority is, meaning your focus is on your parents, let it fully be on them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's part of what happens is that's why that prioritizing is so important, because otherwise we're just kind of dispersed everywhere. There's a little of me here, a little of me here, a little of me here, as opposed to, so that's something that you can do, is when they're in your focus, let them fully be in your focus.
That's good.
And part of that might be as well is what we had spoke of earlier, the practical application of the urgent and urgency, is a family deciding what's urgent and deciding then what's important.
Yeah.
And it's not always necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
And so urgent has to obviously get your attention, but sometimes in a family system, too many things have been labeled as urgent and they're not.
Yeah.
And so, and if it's not, what Nate said, it's really important to give yourself a lot of grace that's not urgent, but it's important to somebody.
Yeah.
So what they want is, and so scheduling in that so that everybody has an opportunity for what's important as well.
I think another thing I would add, again, just maybe through the way I'm hearing how the person's asking the question is, they may need to learn the language of asking for help, right? Learning how to say, I need help. Like I need help, whether it's de-stressing or I need some alone time or whatever it is. It's recognize your own needs as well.
Yeah.
Because again, when different people react to stress in different ways, and some people are the fighters, right? They go after, and they're trying to help. They're the people in the fire, right? That are trying to put it out. I mean, sometimes those people are sometimes the worst at asking for help.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do that necessarily.
Yeah. I definitely hear a little bit of burnout in this question. And you got to live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow, as my boss would say. But asking for help is one way to really set that up, I guess. That's good. So, Nate, one thing that's definitely taken over my habits in this season has been compulsivity. Is sometimes I'm just compulsive and I do things. So, how can you explain how that's affecting all of us, kind of in our lives? Yeah.
So, I'll probably dissect it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I know we're bumping up against self-care, so I'll try to keep it brief. And so, in dissecting it, I'd first like to look at habit, right? Defining habit. And so, what happens when we do a behavior or any action? Our brain essentially leaves like breadcrumbs, right? Or it sort of puts a map over it. The brain loves to be an automatic, right? Autonomic functioning, and so a lot of the activities we do, the brain wants to memorize that and keep it fresh so that it can keep getting that reward, right? The brain can. And so Charles Duhigg wrote the book Power of Habit, excellent book. But he broke down habit like cue, routine, reward.
James Clear's something similar to that. But
Yeah.
More recent book.
Nice.
But yeah.
So there's this habit function, right? So this is we're kind of getting to the compulsion part, but one more piece to unpack, and that's there's a part of our brain that's goal directed, and that would be like the foreman of the habit process.
Okay.
So if there's any new information that comes along, the goal directed part of your brain is saying, okay, stop, or here, go this direction instead. An example of that would be, eating until you're full. Right? The brain is like, nope, you've had enough. That part of you is done. Right? And so, compulsion is, I think, sort of the breakdown of this communication process between the habit and the goal directed. Okay. And the way it breaks down is the reward of the habit overrides the goal directed process.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's no longer, it's almost like it's muted or you can't hear it anymore. And so compulsion is, simply put, I guess, repeated action with less and less power to stop it. So you're more compelled to do it. And in the pandemic, I think what that looks like is, especially for me, is I was more conditioned to start checking Facebook or checking information than actually trying to find meaning. Right? So I'm getting conditioned to just that, right? Almost like that's satisfactory. But here I am trying to find out and learn things, so I keep going back, and the more you're compelled to do it, you're starting to wear down your energy, you're starting to get fatigued, and the more the fatigue sets in, the more mental health suffers, right? So you might have higher incidence of anxiety, depression, right? Mood swings that seem out of left field.
That's good. That's really good. So much of my own life running through that, and how as you explain that. But so ultimately, compulsion leads to bad habits. A little bit is what you're saying.
It's sort of a self-feeding, right?
Yeah.
So the bad habits create it, right? This brain's got this natural process now, but then the bad habits are sort of the result of it as well.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
And so it can continue or it can worsen.
Oof. That's no fun. All right. And with the environment change that happened with COVID-19, all of our regular habits were reset a little bit, right? Like a lot of our environments and our schedules and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so
threw a lot of it in sort of an uproar or an upheaval maybe.
Yeah. I definitely noticed that in myself, where it was like, okay, I have to be intentional about the habits that I keep doing.
Yeah, because sometimes social media can be, at its best, like respite, right? Like this is a little bit of, I've been really super focused here and I just need a break. So I'm going to just go on and see, what's happening, right? I feel like I'm caught up in the world. During something like what we're going through, then it shifts to, I've got to see what's going on in the world all the time, right? So it's no longer a respite, it's almost the thing I'm doing to survive.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure for social media.
And we actually become addicted to it a little bit, right?
Yeah. Our power to choose not to do it becomes less and less the more we do it.
That's scary, just to think about, because I'm sure so many of us did it. Like the people who started working from home, if they started working from home and they worked from their couch, but the only thing they do from that couch is watch Netflix, they're probably not in a work state of mind anymore.
Yeah, I think that matters.
Okay. It's really good. So Brenda, I want to talk about something. So we could have tackled a lot more of parenting in a digital age and like how all of that works. But what you've done is you have these 3 booklets that are just phenomenal resources that everyone can get in the link below that should be popping up in the chat on the screen. And you'll be able to click that link, and then you can download these booklets off the Core's website, or if you ever come back into the Core for an appointment or, post-COVID, you'll be able to pick actually one of these up physically. But I want to read a quick excerpt from the first one that I just found really interesting. And so what this is talking about is this is talking about technology, raising your kids on screen time, and how we approach that. So what you said is, while setting strict limits on screen time usage is an option for the sake of more balance, there is a healthier alternative: self-regulation. This essentially means the establishment of a life rhythm in which the unrestrained use of technology registers in our mind as uncomfortable and not desirable. This is so good. And that's just a quick preview of everything that you can get in this booklet. So as you guys are going, as you're moving forward, and if you are a parent or you work with kids, you have nephews, nieces, whatever, pick these up. They're good resources. I looked through them, read through them, and it's just a ton of good, awesome content. So you guys can find those in the link below and on the Core website. So I just want to highlight that. Brenda, anything that I'm not adding about those booklets that you'd like to add?
First of all, thank you. That was kind how you shared those. I hope, just simply this, I just hope that everybody finds them useful. There's a lot of tips in there. I wrote a lot of different activities to, at that time it was pre-COVID, and the whole goal of it was to, for families especially, to do things that were not all digital based. And so Nate's done such a beautiful job of talking about the whole neuroscience part of it, and we have all these neural pathways that can form, and it's not bad that we have the ones around technology, around all the digital part, but we need to develop the other parts too. So there's some exercises in there to practice, I hope some really fun ways to practice doing the delayed gratification. Kind of turned it into some games for the family in a way. And Nate had talked earlier about some of the chemicals, and dopamine is one of our feel-good chemicals that a lot of it is dropped in social media and gaming and all of that. But the more important way that we can get dopamine is through deep relationship and connection.
Yeah.
And so part of that is just balancing some of that out.
And showing the kids that they can get that dopamine rush from something other than the screens, right?
Exactly. And that's, in the quote that you read in there, that's where that comes from, which is we have to teach and train our brain to like other things.
Yeah.
When you think of the kiddos, like you want to expand their eating beyond, where's Neely at right now? Neely's eating what?
Lots of good stuff. She has a pretty good diet.
Yeah.
She likes toast. I don't know, this is not helpful, but.
Yeah, right, yeah. But you do with the kids is we try to expand what they're eating.
Yeah, right.
And this is the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, technology is just the easy hit. And so some of the things we're talking about are harder.
Yeah.
But we have to do those. And even as adults, we need to practice doing some of those things that don't come as easily.
Yeah.
So that's what that's about.
Yeah. From that excerpt, I almost get the feeling of there's a better solution than just a screen time cap. And that is, that's really good to hear.
Right.
If that is what you're saying. And that's very exciting. So we've got a few minutes left, and I know we really wanted to get to the self-care practical portion. How do we take care of ourselves in this season? So Brenda, how can we practice self-care to help us combat anxiety, stress, burnout?
Yeah, I have some tips I wanted to share, and then of course we want to leave a little bit of time if there's additional questions, and guys, feel free to jump in here as you'd like. One of the things I think that's super important that we do is think about, and this, I apologize right up front, I might raise some stress just saying this, that's not my intention, but if the internet went down for a day or a week, what would you do? What would you do? What activities would you do? How would you spend your time? And probably even more, I think, for the younger millennials and our Zoomers that don't have any idea what that could be. Nate and I, certainly I'll speak for myself, I know what to do. So I'm part of Gen X. I'm the older Gen X. Nate's part of the younger Gen X. We have kind of both. We can, in a weird way, we can survive this a little bit better in that, hey, we can do all the digital stuff. Big chunk of our life was that. But we're also we remember, pre all of this, and we can go back and fall back on some of those things. So for some individuals that are younger perhaps, and maybe others, but certainly it's you have to be real creative and think of what those things would be. What would that look like if it was just down?
Yeah, that would be really tough. I've got a cabin in Minnesota that we don't have cell service at. So that's probably the only ideas that I would have.
Right. And do those anyway, because that way if something were to happen, you're kind of a step ahead. But there again, it's expanding what you're doing. The next one is variety. And for some, variety comes easy. And if you're familiar with the Enneagram, the Neyens are your real fun-loving crew. I think it's the Neyens. I hope I got the right one. I don't have the Enneagram as memorized as I'd like to. But they're real fun-loving, and they think of a lot of creative different ways to do things. So if you're not really good at this, find the people in your life that are. That like to just creatively think about how to do things differently. And even go to the kiddos. So I think of with Nate's kiddos, they love to try things different ways. They're not set on it has to be done this certain way.
All right.
What happens if we throw this in the cookies? What happens to the cookies? What kind of cookie will arrive at the end? And this is super important because variety, and look at the smiles you guys are getting just as we're talking about, just me sharing this, lowers your anxiety and your stress. It just does.
Interesting.
Because it means in an important way we're not taking ourselves so serious and the world around us so serious. And for some this is difficult to do, but for some people it comes more naturally. So hang out with some people that comes a little more naturally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just it can be as simple as, for those that are driving to work, it's as simple as driving a different way home from work.
Wow.
Is trying something new. And I think this is super important in COVID-19 when our optimal way is not a thing in a lot of areas, to go in and practice and say to yourself, this is going to be good enough. It's not my favorite way to do it. It's not optimal. I was hearing earlier today, I think of like for married couples, where you're at, even with COVID-19, you may not be on the same page with everything. Someone may be more comfortable with some activity, and the other person may be like, I'm not ready for that yet. So how can you creatively find a middle ground, even on some of those things? Is super helpful and just lowers your anxiety. It's a really good one to do. Let's see.
Yeah, my daughter, I've learned a lot from her in this. I was thinking of the imaginative piece of it. I mean, she was out in the yard 2 weeks into this. She's taking a rocket to the moon. She's fighting aliens to get the cure. I was just really captured by that, just how imaginative she got, right? A little bit of boredom, a little bit of, but she went straight to imagination. And I think that's some of that self-care you're talking about, is that, allow boredom to teach you and train you a little bit.
Yeah. That's
sort of
good.
Embrace it.
Huh.
That is so good. Okay, let's see. My next tip on here. It's really important to schedule some activities that you've just decided there's no way you're going to move them, that are replenishing. Now, it's super easy in this season to do things that are just kind of zone out. I think you may have even said like Netflix or something like that.
Yeah.
Like we can just go watch something, but it doesn't necessarily replenish. It's just kind of that zone out. And by the way, it's okay if once in a while you just zone out. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm suggesting activities that by doing that activity, coming out of that is so replenishing that those around you would be able to observe more fruit of the Spirit in your life. So this is kind of expanding on what I had shared earlier. If you're online too much, if you come off of gaming, the social media, whatever it is, or even like watch a lot of movies, whatever it may be, and you're irritable and angry with people, here's a cue: overuse. And so if that's what's happening, you're just zoning out, but you're not doing something that's replenishing. So that's super important to have some of those in there. Let's see. Oh, yes. Okay. I was just reading through a couple of them that I've already covered. I want to kind of not move into some new areas. I think this is really important. Stress likes an outlet. So I think it's really important that each one of us finds a cause that we can engage in.
Okay.
And that's a really good one for it. And so some of it might be those things that you just really, really care about and you're posting a lot online about. But what's the tangible thing you can do to make a difference? And so if I'm posting something just over and over and over again, all I'm doing is making my stress and the stress of people around me higher.
Yeah.
It would be much better use if I found something actual, tangible that I can do. And for those that are high mercy out there, anything that's painful and difficult, you're taking in all of that. This is another reason why having a cause can be important. And then give yourself permission to kind of ignore the other areas, and then just trust that that's going to be an area of importance for another person, and you don't have to be all things to all people.
Okay.
That's super important for the mercy people, because they see this group of people's hurting, this person's hurting, this person's hurting, and they're taking that all in, and it's adding a lot of stress to their life.
Okay. I even talked about that a little bit in my sermon, of like a part of the solution to overcoming anxiety is finding a cause or an idea or something that's bigger than you to focus on. because Nate, you had a much more technical and better definition of humility than I did. But I used C.S. Lewis's humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. Yeah. So if we can find a cause that's bigger than us, for me personally, it's the local church. I want to help, the capital C church, like the Christ's bride, move forward in the world. And that helps me stem and calm down the anxiety that's inside of me, because I'm worrying about other people and I'm looking at other people, and that actually helps quell the anxiety. So that's super good that you just brought that up.
Yeah. One tip I wanted to share, this is more on a boundary. When I see, and there again, this is kind of, right now we see it on the social media, but this can be something that I can happen in person. Like if I hear somebody talking about something a lot, this kind of is a flow out of the one I just shared. So like if I hear Nate talking about something a lot, and he's posting a lot, and whatever it is it something that I can tell is important to him, but is anxiety producing because it's people hurting, or it's a cause of something difficult going on, and there's so many things you could fill that in with. Yeah. Something that can be really helpful is encourage that person. So in this case, I'd be encouraging Nate. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about this? And that's a way to kind of stop that pattern people can get in of just continually posting things that are causing kind of the collective anxiety to go up. Yeah. And another way to do it is if it's somebody that's close to you, is maybe even offering, hey, I noticed that you're posting on that a lot. Is there something tangible that you're able to do? Or is there even something that I can help you with in that area? Okay. And if the answer is they're not really going to go there, that would be one of those where those particular things, I would urge you to mute those. Okay. Because it's difficult, especially, once again, if you're high mercy, to read and see those things and not be able to do anything about those. Okay. And so somebody, and they're not able to see it, it's their blind spot. So if that was Nate, that would be one of his blind spots, that he's posting all this, kind of getting this angst going, but is not necessarily doing anything about it.
Okay, we just got a question in. What if your cause has been put on hold due to COVID? It's stressful that I can't meet and be with the group that I volunteer with. Zoom doesn't cut it. Any ideas?
Okay. Could you read that one more time, please?
Yeah. What do you do if that cause that's bigger than you, that you want to pour yourself into, has been shut down due to COVID or put on hold? It's stressful that I can't meet and be with a group I volunteer with. Zoom doesn't cut it. Any ideas? I volunteer for Parent Life, Relay for Life, Christians Ministry. I'm missing it all. Yeah. That's hard.
That is hard. Well, the first part of that I just feel compelled to share is, if you have not lamented that loss, I hope that you do that, because that's a loss. Yeah. And so part of it is just even, have you allowed yourself to go there? Because that is a loss. Okay. The second thing is, going back to kind of what I was sharing earlier, is do you have individuals around you that kind of have that creative bend? And have and discuss this with them to see if maybe there's something that can be done. Okay. And then the reality is this: there's just some things that we can't do right now. What I would encourage you to do in this situation, and to the person who asked this question, but all those listening, is there a cause that you can get behind that's maybe not yours right now, which is painful for me to even say that part of it, but somebody that's near and dear and you care about, that you can be involved in. I think it's just vitally important, COVID, no COVID, that there's something that you're passionate about, that you can do something about. Just an example I would share in that is, I have things that I'm super passionate about. And I tend to do this. I like to have things that I can really pour my heart and soul into, and then I like to reserve kind of X amount of energy, time, treasures, all those things in my life where I'm pouring into the passion of another person. Okay. So I was doing that pre-COVID, and now I'm finding that even more important to do so.
Can you share any examples of doing that?
I'm
Without
trying
getting
to
too personal?
Yeah,
or-
I'm trying, the stuff in my life I can, I'm just trying to think of a way to share or say this that I'm not,
Breaking confidence.
sharing too much of somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Gosh, let me think of one. Yeah, I'll use this as an example. One of my family members, we all are kind of pet lovers,
Okay.
but one particular member of my family loves just, the fostering of animals, and which all of that, of course, is kind of changed right now too.
Yeah.
And so now it's more of what can we do to help, the animals that are still in a shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And there again, I love animals, but it's not like it's not my top area.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we can do,
Okay.
is to invest into those areas as well.
That's really good.
I'm kind of keeping track of the time here to see if there's any more questions. I know there was a last couple,
Yeah.
just even helpful things we wanted to share. I'm just seeing if there's anything else I kind of wanted to throw in there.
Yeah. One thing you did mention is knowing your Enneagram type.
Yes.
And how that can be
Yes.
helpful.
Yeah, and I think we have a link that we can put up for that. And there's a specific link that I found that I really liked because it's a very simple little assessment to tell you what your Enneagram type is. But what I like about it is for each type, there's ways that stress hits us differently.
Okay.
So I wanted to just share that as kind of a quick, easy little resource, just to be aware of what stress looks like for you specifically.
Okay.
On the Enneagram, I happen to be an 8. And one of the things that's important to an 8 is to fight for, it's kind of what I was just talking about. That's probably why I lit up so much. It's like fighting for causes and
Yeah.
to be an advocate
Yes.
is super important. And so, for example, to use the pandemic as an example, as I'm always looking for what can I do? What can I do? And it's even how can I push back against this pandemic, as if that's really a thing. It's not really a thing, but that's what I'm always looking for. In the middle of this, how can I do advocacy?
Okay.
And so for each number on the Enneagram, they're going to have different things they're trying to, that they can contribute
Yeah.
in those that will lessen their stress.
Yeah, that's good. So apparently we're having an issue with the chat feature. So those of you at home, that's why you're not seeing the link down below. Is
okay.
Zoom is actually not letting us share that.
Okay.
So the website is Truity, so TRUITY.com, and then blog. So if you go there and search Enneagram resources, you'll be able to find the quiz there, I believe. But otherwise, we can find a way to post these onto the event on Facebook afterwards
Absolutely,
or something.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's pretty common anymore to
Yeah.
find.
Yeah.
Really, I think any test on the Enneagram.
Ian Morgan
is-
Cron has some great stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So, or they can read The Road Back to You.
Yes.
It's outstanding book, but that will help you kind of pinpoint which Enneagram number you are. And he does mention the stressors in your life and how they affect you. So, a little
Yes.
bit. But yeah. So that is all very helpful. Last couple of questions here. Nate, how does someone know, because we want to give people practical ways to move forward, how does someone know if they need to pursue a counselor, see one-on-one counseling?
Yeah. I think there's a number of ways there. My concern is people seeking it sort of too late. Maybe that's maybe it's hyperbole, but they're in burnout already, and there were signs earlier, and so I guess what I would say is you can go into a counselor even if you don't feel like you're in a major crisis, right? Again, I know we're in a pandemic, so the word crisis has changed, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's looking at how are you functioning, right? Is it challenged? Is it are you having trouble returning to what seems like a normal way of handling things?
Yeah.
And just know that counselors sure, it's our profession, but really, our job is to work ourselves out of a job. And so if people come in with something and, we don't think they need additional counseling, or there's not something, we're not going to take them down that road.
Well,
and so some of it's maybe even helpful to just get sort of assessment of what's the state of union of me right now, of my mental health. This stuff's going on. I just need to talk it out. So anyway, I think
that's really good.
What would normally be reasons for seeking counseling, I think things have changed, and so it doesn't hurt to set up an appointment.
Yeah. And so, Brenda, what happens if someone can't afford counseling resources?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that. At the core, but I know CityCare, most counseling agencies, we, especially as Christian counseling agencies, we strive to make sure that we get everybody connected. That's super important. So we have a lot of different avenues as far as the financial piece.
Perfect.
So we have a lot of things in play to make sure that that's not a barrier to people getting help.
Awesome. That's so good.
Yeah, so
Love
if that's
your ministry.
you, or if you know somebody, just have them reach out.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's one of the favorite parts of my job is to help making that connection, whether it's a counseling intern or one of our licensed folks. But we have different avenues to help out with that.
Outstanding. Awesome. Well, we are out of time, so I'm going to check for questions. Looks like there are no new ones. So thank you guys so much for watching the Stressed Out Seminar. This has been great. We will be praying for you as you move forward. Feel free to share this with family, friends, whoever you think this could help. We hope this has been helpful, and we will see you later.